Well, good evening again. My name is Tim. I'm the pastor here. Really glad that you have joined us this evening. We are starting a brand new church. Really exciting. Took a lot to get here in a short amount of time. Typically, a church that gets started takes about 6 to 9 months, sometimes a year, to get ramped up to planting a new church, to having what we're experiencing today. We had about 4.5 weeks, I think. And so by God's grace, we're here. Amen. We're here. And we're starting a new church because we believe that there's a lot of people in Phoenix who need to know who Jesus is. We believe that there's a lot of people in Phoenix who need to become more like Jesus. We believe that there's a lot of people in Phoenix who need to join Jesus in his mission to make disciples of Jesus. And so we're coming out of a weird situation into planting a new church, but we know this, that Jesus is not done with us yet. That Jesus has more for this church family. Jesus has more for this city to make much of him, to glorify him, and to give us an immense amount of joy. It's been crazy, but it's been a joyful time ramping up to start Phoenix Bible Church. So I'm glad that you're here. If you're new and just checking us out for the first time, I'm glad that you're here. If you've been with us, I'm thankful that you're here this evening. As we get started as a new church, we're going to be talking about this series called To the Core. Values that shape who we are and what we do. This is crucial for us as we start a new church to see who are we and what do we do. As we get started as a church, there's going to be conflict. I'm going to say things that frustrate you. I'm going to make mistakes. We're going to fight amongst each other at times. As we start a new church, we're going to want to form new ministries, and opportunities are going to come before us of things that we can take on that we think are glorifying to God. There's going to be other opportunities that some of us want to do and some of us don't want to do, and so it's very crucial that we know who we are and what we do. What shapes that? And so that's what we're going to look at over the next 4 weeks, and tonight we're going to start with who? Jesus. We're going to start with Jesus because it all has to start with Jesus. We all have to be centered on Jesus because Jesus is the center of all things, and that changes everything. It changes our lives, and it changes the way we do church. So we're going to start with Jesus. And then over the next 4 weeks, we're going to go into what it looks like to be Bible-based as a church. That we believe the Bible, all of it. That we live by it. That we believe it reveals the person and work of Jesus. Then we're going to go into what it looks like to be community-focused. And then mission-minded. And so we're going to tackle what it looks like for us to be Phoenix Bible Church. What does that mean for us in this city? And so I'm excited that you're with us. I'm excited, hopefully, that you'll be with us over the next 4 weeks as we talk about what we feel like Jesus has called us to as a church. And so we're starting with Jesus is at the center. And so I want you guys to grab a Bible. If you don't have one, hopefully there's one in front of you. Grab a Bible and head to Colossians chapter 1. That's where we're going to be this evening. And we're looking at that Jesus is the center of all things, and that changes everything. That when we realize that we're not at the center, that Jesus is at the center, that changes everything. Changes the way we parent, changes the way we do marriage, changes the way we do friendship and life, and that changes the way we do church. Jesus is the center of all things. We're going to look at Colossians 1 to see that, and I think if we're honest, a lot of us struggle with being me-centered. Even as you walk in tonight, you're thinking about what everyone else is going to think of you. And the problem with that is everybody else is walking in here thinking the same thing. So all of us are walking in here like, what are they going to think of me? How do I look? Is this new shirt fit right? That's what I was thinking this weekend. We all walk in here thinking, what are people thinking about us? They're not thinking about you. They're thinking about themselves. Right? How many times do we walk into a room, even tonight, and we're me-centered? If you're having a good season in life, you begin to think, I got this. God, I'll come to you when I need you, but I got this. This is on me. When we're having a bad season in life, we think, why me? When there's things that are boring or confusing, we think, I'm going to complain. Because it's about me, right? It revolves around me. We all struggle with that in some capacity. But what we're going to look at in Colossians 1 is that that's a very short-sighted view. Like, even if you're here and you don't know Jesus, you would agree that the world does not revolve around you. Like, that's a short-sighted view. At the very least, we minimize our whole life, our whole of relationships, our whole of even church, and say, it's just right here. And we don't see everything before us, everything that Jesus has before us, because we're me-centered, not Jesus-centered. So how do we break out of this? How do we break out of this in life, and how do we break out of this in church? Well, look with me at Colossians 1, verse 15 is where we'll start. It says this, He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by Him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things were created through Him and for Him. So Paul is writing to the church at Colossae who were being infiltrated by false teaching. False teaching that would have said that Jesus was a good person, that Jesus was a good man, that Jesus was even a good teacher, but that He was not God. Because they were infiltrated by this false teaching called Gnosticism. Basically a teaching that taught, one of the things they taught was that the flesh was evil. And so how could God become a man? How could God become flesh? Because flesh is evil. And so they were teaching that Jesus was an important person, but He was not preeminent. And so as we look at the text, there's individual sermons with each one of these words. There's a lot here, but I want you to look at it. Look with me at verse 15. It says, He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. And so Jesus is the image of the invisible God. Jesus shows us what God is like. All right, there's a whole sermon series just right there. As you read the Gospels and you look at the life of Jesus, you're seeing what God the Father is like. Because as we said even in Hebrews, that He's the exact imprint of the nature of God. So we can know what Jesus is like by just reading about His life. And then we see He's the firstborn of all creation. That by Him all things were created in heaven, on earth, visible, invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through Him and for Him. So this idea of firstborn of all creation, it doesn't mean that Jesus was the first one to be born. It means that Jesus has all the heirs and all the rights to all of creation as a firstborn son would have in his family. So authorities, rulers, government, presidents, Jesus is over all of that because He created all of that. Everything was created through Him and for Him, for His glory. And so as we talk about what it means to be Jesus-centered, we have to get straight who Jesus is, right? That Jesus is creator. We see that in just these two verses, that Jesus is creator. Jesus became a man, entered into human history, and was born as a baby, but He didn't start there. That Jesus is from the beginning, that He created everything that's in existence. So we have to start with who Jesus actually is if we're going to be Jesus-centered as a church. Now, some of you might say, well, Tim, we're all in church. Most of the people I know sitting around me have been in church for a very long time. We all know who Jesus is. We know that Jesus is the Creator. You need to know as a new church, one of the things that's going to define us is that every time we preach the Word of God, every time we meet in a community group, every time we have a conversation about church and what it's about, we're going to talk about Jesus. We're going to talk about who Jesus is, what Jesus has done, because we can never move past that. We can't ever assume that everyone knows who Jesus really is, even in a place like Phoenix. We have to continually go back to Jesus. In honor of our new meeting location, the great Martin Luther said this when talking about the gospel of Jesus Christ. He said we can never go beyond the gospel. We have to continually beat it in our heads. That's what we're going to do as Phoenix Bible Church. We're going to continue to go back to the gospel because we can never move past it. We can never assume that you or that I have it down because we can't. It's too grand, it's too great. So we have to talk about who Jesus is. My wife is a very gracious woman for many reasons. That's why I'm standing here right now through all of this. But another reason she's gracious is that I'm a big Cowboys fan. I know, hold your applause. I'm a big Cowboys fan, and every year of our marriage, even since having kids, except for the last 2, we've gone to Dallas Cowboys training camp. Don't be jealous. And if you're not familiar with football, training camp is just practice, okay? But every year we pack up, and as a family vacation, we go to Dallas Cowboys training camp. So a couple years ago, we're sitting on the front row trying to get some autographs. And then there's this older gentleman sitting next to me. And he starts to lean over and talk to me. And just FYI, there's a possibility we may watch football together at some point. I'm a very friendly guy, very accessible, very approachable. But when I'm watching the Cowboys, I want to focus. Okay? It's no offense. I want to focus. And so this guy next to me is talking to me, asking me questions, and he's saying this. As he sees somebody come close that could give us an autograph, he's like, hey, who's number 82? I'm like, that's Jason Witten. I think you should know that, but okay, I'll give you that one for free. That's Jason Witten. Who's number 24? Well, that's Marion Barber. Okay, and then it just keeps going on, and as I tell him who these players are, he yells out their name very loudly. So, who is that guy? Well, that's Jason Witten. Jason! Jason! Right here! Sign my football right here! And it just keeps going on and on. Marion! Marion! And then, before we know it, it's, who's that? Who's number 9? The guy who's throwing the football to everybody? Who's that guy? I'm just like, Jay, let's go. like that's Tony Romo. He's the quarterback of the team. And I'm just like, I start thinking like, we're here at Dallas Cowboys practice in August. Like, you kind of have to be a little bit disturbed to even be here right now. I'll admit that. Be gracious. And why are you here if you don't even know the players? That doesn't really make a lot of sense. Some of you, again, we live in Phoenix. There's a lot of churches. Some of you are church goers. This is what you do. You're here tonight because it's your routine. I mean, we messed it up by having it at night, but this is your routine. You know where you're going to be. Some of you went to church this morning and tonight. It's okay. I still love you. It's good. Glad that you're here. But in the midst of that, we can forget why it is we come. We can forget that not everybody knows who Jesus really is. We can go through the motions. Some of you are here because it's new and you just want to check it out. Some of you are here because you got tricked into coming. They said, hey, let's go to this new place downtown. It's pretty hip. You're like, I think this is a church and there's one exit. That's kind of obvious if I leave right now. Why ever you are here, whoever you are, I want to lay all the cards on the table. We want you to know who Jesus is. We want you to know who Jesus is. However you walk in here, we want you to know who Jesus really is. You can't be a fan of a team that you don't know any of the players. You can't follow and worship and serve Jesus if you don't know who he really is. Not who you think he is, not who you feel he is, but who he really is. And what we see in this passage from the Apostle Paul is that Jesus is the creator of all things. He's the creator of all things. As we talk about what it means to be Jesus-centered, not me-centered, we have to realize that you were created. You're not here by happenstance. You're not here randomly. Those that think you don't have a purpose, those that think your life is indifferent, those that work a job and go in and out of life, meandering through the routine, you need to know that you were created through Jesus, for Jesus. That your life has meaning, that your life has purpose. That as we see who Jesus really is, as we center on Him, it changes everything. That everything you do matters. Because it's an opportunity to bring glory to the Creator of the universe. Jesus isn't just a man. Jesus wasn't just born as a baby. Jesus is the sovereign creator of the universe. As a church, we're always going to go back to that. We're never going to assume that someone knows who He is. We always need to start with Jesus. And that's where we start tonight. Look at verse 17 with me. Verse 17, it says this, "And He is before all things, and in Him all things hold together. And He is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in everything He might be preeminent." So Jesus is the creator, but He does not stop there. He's the creator, so you have purpose. He's the creator, so you have purpose. But He doesn't stop there. He's the sustainer of all things. Look back at the text with me. It says He's before all things. In Him all things hold together. Jesus is the glue that makes everything hold together. Creation, nature, systems, processes, churches. Jesus is holding it all together. He's the creator, but He's also the sustainer. He doesn't leave us. He's with us now. That's when we gather together. That's when we set up all these things. That's when we work so hard to plant a new church. Because we believe that Jesus, the God of the universe, chooses to dwell with us even now. Do you know that? Has going to church become so routine that you have forgotten that you, even now, are encountering Jesus, the Creator, the Sustainer of all things? That's when we gather as a church to meet that Jesus. He is in complete control. It says in this text that He holds all things together, that He's the head of the body, the church. He is in complete control. Do you believe that? Do you live functionally like that Jesus is in control? I think if we're honest, most of us spin our wheels because we want desperately to be in control. Because we're not quite sure if Jesus can really sustain things. We're not quite sure if He's really the glue that keeps all things together. And so we grasp for control at every chance we get. I do this in my own life. Little things, like when I'm at the bank and I'm waiting to go to the ATM. And it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Tuesday. And I'm in this long line at the ATM at the bank, and I think, what are all these people doing here? I mean, they're probably cashing their paycheck from like working on video games or something else, and maybe they just got done playing video games, and their mom gave them a $5 bill, and so they're in this line. Why is it 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Tuesday, and all these people are in line ahead of me at the bank? So I want to control the line. And then I start going after the bank. I start thinking, come on, bank. I mean, really? 2 ATMs? I mean, couldn't you have thought that through a little bit better? I mean, if I was in control, right, we'd have 10 ATMs. Walk up, drive up, every possibility imaginable, because if I was in control, I would find some rest in that. Because I could just drive up to the bank. None of the guys playing video games would be ahead of me. there would be ATMs galore. It'd be beautiful. Because I was in control. Because what I want is the rest that comes from that. Like if I was in control and I knew, just pull up to the bank and get my stuff done. There's some rest that comes with that. So in little things, we want to control. In big things, I want to control. The last few months, the last year of my life has been a little chaotic. And there's many things that I want to control. As we found out that the church we were before this was closing down, I wanted to control that. I wanted to know exactly, precisely what was going to happen, how it was going to happen. I wanted to control that. A week after we found out the church was closing, my wife calls me after church, and I was about to meet with somebody after church, and she says these words, and men, if you've heard these words, you know that these are not easy words to miss. She calls me and says, in tears, I'm pregnant. Those are big words, right? Big words. I'm pregnant. And to be honest, my first response was like, God, not good timing. Our church just closed down. I think we could wait 6 months, see if Phoenix Bible Church works out. See if I can get some insurance. That'd be nice. That was my first response. And of course, to my wife, I say, oh, sweetie, that's so great. It's going to be awesome. And it is going to be awesome. We're so excited that we're having a new child. What a blessing. And as we sat down, as we prayed through that, we began to see that God's timing is better than our timing. That Jesus has a better plan than we could ever have. It doesn't make sense to us right now. But we're excited because it's a new life. Right? It's amazing. So we're excited, not because we're in control, because we're trusting that Jesus is in control, that He is sustaining all things. At the bank, in my life, in your life, in our church. Where are you chasing control in your life? Is it success? Is it self-sufficiency? Is it a promotion? Where are you chasing control? As you and I do that, as we don't trust Jesus to be the sustainer that He says He is, it's exhausting. Right? Some of you this morning, this evening, come in here exhausted. It's a never-ending power grab for you. You want to control everything, from spreadsheets to the way the trash is taken out, to the way the clothes are folded at night. You want to control everything. The next events in your life, when you're going to have a baby, you want to control it. You want to time it all up. And Jesus wants to humble you, not to frustrate you, but to teach you to trust in Him. That He is the sustainer of all things. That He is the glue that's keeping things together. Because when we trust Jesus as not only creator, but sustainer, we find rest. As we see that Jesus is creator, we find purpose. As we see that Jesus is sustainer, we find rest. Are you centered on Jesus? He is the center of all things, and that changes everything. Look back at the text with me, verse 19. It says this, "For in Him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through Him to reconcile to Himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of His cross." So Jesus is the creator, the sustainer, but He's also the reconciler. We see in this text that peace is made available through the cross. Through the violent act of the cross, peace is made available. We see in Jesus that everything gets flipped upside down, right? That in our lives, if we just look at our lives, if we're me-centered, we see life as we live and then we die. Jesus changes that. He flips it on its head. He says, no, you die and then you live. You die to yourself And then you know what life really is. Jesus flips everything on its head through the violent act of the cross, as he was beaten, as he was bruised, as his body was crushed. Through that violent act, we get peace. Jesus is reconciling all things to himself by making peace through the blood of the cross. I want you to hear this morning, this evening. It's going to happen a few times. Sorry. As you look at your life, as you look at your circumstances, that you don't gain reconciliation. You receive reconciliation because of what Jesus has accomplished on the bloody cross for you. That's our only hope for peace. As we look at our world, as we look at our society, everybody across the board wants what? Peace. You see that with ISIS. That's terrible. We want peace. You see that in your neighborhood. You see that as you watch the news. We cry out for peace. Even if you're here and you're not a Christian, you would say, I want peace. Yet everywhere we look, there's conflict. In this room, there's conflict. With your spouse, there's conflict. With your friendship, there's conflict. Everywhere we look, there's conflict. My wife and I have been married 8 years, and we went on our honeymoon to Cabo San Lucas. It was glorious. It was really, really great time, and we had all-inclusive, so like all our food and drinks. We were right on the beach. We didn't do anything else but go to the beach. It was a lot of fun. It was kind of interesting because every day they would bring a champagne and a bowl of fruit. And there was supposed to be one complimentary bowl of fruit and champagne, but we just didn't ask any questions. And just we're thankful to God for that. And so every day, champagne fruit. Every day, champagne fruit. 7 days in Cabo San Lucas. Great weather, great beach, great wife. It was amazing. And I think, I would have never said this, but I think that I thought at the time, this is the way it's going to be for the rest of my life. Champagne and fruit brought to my room every night. Cabo San Lucas. This is going to be amazing. Why does everybody not want to get married? They're missing the boat. We get home. The double income, no kids, wasn't as great as we thought it was. We get home, our apartment, our one-bedroom apartment, wasn't as great as we thought it was. We weren't as great as we thought we were. So we began to have what? Conflict, disagreements, frustrations. Our first year of marriage, there wasn't a lot of peace. It was difficult. That honeymoon quickly became a thing of the past. We didn't even remember what the champagne tasted like because there was so much conflict. All of us want peace. We desire peace. Whether you know Jesus or not, you desire peace, but everywhere you look, you see conflict. Could it be that we're looking for peace in the wrong places? You know, my wife and I got back and we began a process, like, why are we having conflict? What can we do about that? And so we started talking to other people and reading books on things like boundaries and words of affirmation. Boundaries aren't bad. Words of affirmation aren't bad, right? Legislation for peace in our society, not a bad thing. But you need to know that peace is only available through the cross of Christ. That the only way we're going to have peace in our church, in our city, in our world, is through Jesus reconciling all things to himself. Where are you looking for peace in your life? In your marriage, are you just talking about the things one another does to hurt you, to harm you? Are you just looking at self-help books on how to rectify that? As you go to your community group and you have division and dissension, are you having side conversations about those people? Are you doing everything else? Are you going to everyone else to talk about that situation but Jesus, the one who reconciles all things to himself, the one who makes available peace through the cross? Everybody wants peace, but we're looking in all the wrong places. You need to know tonight that peace isn't available through new parameters. It's only available through a new position. That new position is in Jesus Christ. 2 Corinthians speaks of a new creation. This isn't a renovation. It's not a remodel. The goal of peace is not set by boundaries and words of affirmation. Those things aren't bad. But the only way we can have peace is experiencing that new creation, is encountering the Jesus who reconciles all things to himself by making peace through the blood of the cross. That's our only hope for peace. Jesus, the Creator, who gives us purpose. Jesus, the Sustainer, who gives us rest. Jesus, the Reconciler, who gives us peace through the blood of his cross. This is Jesus. He's the Creator. He's the Sustainer. He's the Reconciler of all things. Jesus is the center of all things, and that changes everything. Do you know who Jesus really is? Do you know who he is? Functionally, do you know who he is? Paul Tripp talks about this thing called functional gospel amnesia. Functional gospel amnesia. That while we may know the gospel, while you and I may be able to have a conversation and you could recite what the gospel is, that functionally you're not walking in it. You've forgotten it. How many of you, that's where you are today? Functionally, you've forgotten the gospel of Jesus Christ. You've forgotten that Jesus is Creator, so you have purpose. You've forgotten as Jesus the Sustainer, so you have rest. You've forgotten that Jesus is the Reconciler of all things and your only hope for peace. Is that you today? Some of you have gotten wrapped up in the trap of being me-centered and not Jesus-centered. You've gotten wrapped up in the trap of being me-centered and not Jesus-centered. If that's you, if you're just honest, if that's you, what is more important to you right now than Jesus? Is it your career? Is it control? Is it your family? Is it your kids? I'm a parent. I have 2 kids, one on the way. Man, I would love to control that. I would love to know that that's going to be peaceful. I would love to rest in that, in my own strength. I would love for them to grow up and be athletes and scholars, let's be honest. But as I look at my kids, I need to trust Jesus. Functionally, I don't need to forget the gospel, that Jesus is enough, that there's nothing more important than Jesus, that He is better, that if my kids grow up and they're athletes or they're not, if they grow up and they go to a great college or if they don't go to college, that I can't control that because it's not about me. That there is no purpose in that. There is no rest in that. There is no peace in being me-centered. We would all maybe agree to that right now, but tomorrow we'll forget. Tomorrow we'll have that functional gospel amnesia where we forget, who is Jesus? What has he done? As a new church, we can't forget that. As we plant a new church, it has to be centered on Jesus, because Jesus is the center of all things, and that changes everything. It changes your life, and it changes this church, and it changes our world. We have to be clear on who Jesus is. This makes it pretty simple, to be honest. There's a lot of things to figure out as we start a new church. There's a lot of things to figure out. But what's pretty simple is our purpose as a church. We'll craft it in different language. We'll throw it up on the website. We'll try to tag it and remember it and put it on things and brand it. It'll be great. But it'll be something to the effect of, we exist as a church to make much of Jesus. We exist as a church to point people to Jesus. We exist as a church to make disciples of Jesus. We exist as a church to see people meet Jesus, become more like Jesus, and make disciples of Jesus. That's why we're here. That's why we're starting a new church. To see Jesus made much of. We're not going to build a church on a faulty foundation of cute concepts, of idealistic philosophies, of strategies, of methodologies, of cute sermon series, of programs. We're going to start a new church on Jesus, to make much of Jesus. Because he's the creator, the sustainer, and the reconciler of all things. We need to be clear on that. The values that shape who we are, what we do, it has to start with Jesus. Where are you with Jesus? Do you know him? We want you to know Jesus. We want you to meet Jesus tonight. If you don't know him, you can stop listening to me and start talking to Jesus. You can give your life to Jesus. That's our desire for you tonight.